Have you ever felt a close friend slipping away, and no matter how hard you searched for the reason, you couldn't find one? You never said anything wrong. One day they were just less, and somewhere, an algorithm decided that before you did, not a social media algorithm.
Not a recommendation engine. Something older. Something running inside you right now, shaping every relationship you have, every connection you keep, every person you quietly let go. And almost nobody talks about this part, because here's the terrifying thing.
You think you choose your relationships freely. You think love, friendship, loyalty, they're decisions you make consciously, deliberately, with full awareness. But the research says something different, something much darker, something that makes the word choice feel almost like a cruel joke. Let's start with a name, Robert Zajonc, a psychologist who in 1968 ran one of the most quietly disturbing experiments in human history. He exposed people to random shapes, symbols, and faces. Some they saw once, some they saw 20 times. Then he asked them a simple question: which ones do you like? The answer was almost always the ones they'd seen most. Not the most beautiful, not the most interesting, just the most familiar. He called it the mere exposure effect, and when you really sit with what it means, something uncomfortable starts to settle in. You don't love people because they're good for you. You love people because they were nearby. Think about that for a second. Your closest friend, your partner, the people who feel like home to you. The research suggests a terrifying percentage of those bonds formed not because of deep compatibility, not because of fate, but because of proximity. Because your desk was next to theirs. Because your apartment was on the same floor. Because an algorithm of geography and repetition ran its code, and the output was called love. But this is where it gets disturbing, because if proximity builds bonds, it also destroys them, quietly, without announcement. The moment someone leaves your orbit, the moment the repetition stops, the algorithm starts running in reverse. Feelings don't just fade, they actively recalibrate. The brain, always optimizing, begins to reallocate emotional resources. Affection becomes memory. Memory becomes abstraction. And eventually, the person who once felt irreplaceable becomes someone you used to know. You didn't abandon them, the algorithm did, and you never noticed. There's a researcher named Robin Dunbar. He discovered that the human brain can only maintain stable social bonds with roughly 150 people. That's it. 150. And within that, only about 5 people can exist in your innermost circle at any given time. 5. That's the capacity of your deepest intimacy. So what happens when a new person enters? Quietly, unconsciously, someone gets pushed out, not because you chose to drop them, but because the system has limits, and it enforces those limits automatically. You thought your social life was a garden you tended. It's actually a waiting room with a strict occupancy limit. And then something strange happened. Researchers started mapping these social networks over time, tracking who stayed and who drifted, measuring the invisible mechanics of human connection. And they found a pattern so precise, so mathematically consistent, that it looked less like human behavior and more like code. Every relationship has what they call a contact threshold. Fall below it, and the bond begins to decay. Maintain it, and it survives. Exceed it, and it deepens. The relationship you think is warm, fluid, and alive is actually running on a timer you never knew existed. Which means right now, somewhere in your life, a relationship is expiring. You just haven't gotten the notification yet. But here's where the story turns. Because once researchers understood the algorithm, they started asking a different question. Not just how relationships form and die, but why certain people seem immune to it. Why some connections survive years of distance, silence, and separation, while others collapse after weeks. And the answer they found wasn't romantic. It wasn't spiritual. It was almost brutally mechanical. Shared meaning. The relationships that survive the algorithm aren't the ones with the most history. They're the ones where both people constructed a shared internal world, shared language, shared references, shared ways of seeing. When you share meaning with someone, you carry a version of them inside you. And that internal version doesn't decay with distance, because it doesn't need proximity to stay alive. It lives in how you think, how you interpret the world, what makes you laugh in the dark. This is why childhood friends can reunite after a decade and feel immediately close, and why two people can share a bed for years and feel like strangers.
Time and proximity are not the relationship.
Shared meaning is. But then something strange happened. We built a world that quietly destroys shared meaning. We built a world of algorithmic feeds, curated identities, and fractured attention, a world where we perform connection instead of making it. And in that world, the relationship algorithm accelerated. Bonds that would have lasted years now last months. Intimacy that once deepened now loops endlessly on the surface. And we mistake the feeling of being seen for actually being known. Here's the part that should sit uncomfortably. Social media didn't just change how you connect with people. It reprogrammed the input signals of the algorithm itself. Likes, comments, reactions, they simulate the mere exposure effect without requiring actual presence. Your brain receives the chemical signal of connection without the neurological substance of it. You feel like your relationships are thriving. Meanwhile, the real bonds, the ones built on shared meaning and physical co-presence, those are quietly eroding. Because you're feeding the algorithm synthetic data. And it doesn't know the difference. But you do. Late at night, you do. There's a particular kind of modern loneliness that almost nobody has a word for. You're not isolated. You have followers, group chats, friends you see sometimes. But there's a hollow feeling beneath it all. A sense that the connections you have are somehow thinner than they should be, less load-bearing. Like you're surrounded by people who know your name but not your weight. This isn't a personal failure. This is the output of a broken input. The algorithm is working perfectly. It's just working on the wrong things. And here's the existential reframe. We've been telling ourselves a story about love and friendship, a story about souls recognizing each other, about magnetic compatibility, about fated connection. It's a beautiful story, and there's some truth in it. But underneath that story, humming quietly in the background, is something far more mechanical. A biological optimization system running calculations you can't see, measuring costs and benefits you're not aware of, maintaining, growing, and pruning your relationships according to rules that were written millions of years before you were born. This doesn't mean your love isn't real. It means your love is real and automatic. It means the people who stayed in your life might have stayed partly because of architecture, timing, and repetition, and the people who left might have left not because they stopped caring, but because the system ran its cold logic and reallocated. And almost nobody wants to look at that directly. Because if you do, you have to ask a question you might not be ready for. If so much of your connection has been shaped by forces you didn't choose, forces you didn't even know were operating, then what are you actually responsible for? What part of your relationships belongs to you? What part is just the output of proximity, scarcity, and repetition? And here's the unbearable flip side of that question. If you understood the algorithm completely, if you could see every input and variable, would that make love feel more real? Or would it make love disappear entirely? Maybe that's what we're actually afraid of, not loneliness. Not loss. But the possibility that connection, that the thing we organize our entire lives around, the thing that gives us reason to stay, might be less transcendent than we need it to be. That when you strip away the poetry, what's left is a system. A beautiful, deeply human, quietly mechanical system. Or maybe there's a third option. Maybe the fact that we can see the algorithm, name it, resist it, choose to override it, choose to invest in connection even when the system says to let go. Maybe that's the most human thing of all. Maybe free will isn't the absence of the algorithm. Maybe it's the awareness of it. But here's the thing. Awareness changes the equation. Once you know the contact threshold exists, you can choose to maintain it. Once you know proximity isn't love, you can choose to build meaning instead. Once you know the algorithm, you can decide what it computes. The question is whether you will. Whether, knowing all of this, you'll put down your phone tonight and make contact with someone who's been quietly fading. Not because it feels urgent, because the timer you couldn't see is running, and some doors don't close slowly. They close quietly, mid-sentence, without warning, and you only notice when you reach for someone who used to be there, and they're already gone. And